Well, CP, let's just let me know when we're
Yeah.
good.
Well, yep, I've already got it queued up. Just give me a second. It's halfway there to being queued up, and then I'll let you know.
All
Yep.
right. Thanks.
You're all set. Go for it on your cue.
All right. All right. Well, welcome everybody to Agile and Colors Share Your Story series. I'm Nicole Spence-Goon, and I'm a member of the core team for Agile and Color, and I'm ho your host today. So the Share Your Story series, we come together on a quarterly meetup event where we profile various Black agilists, tech professionals, and thought leaders. The goal is to tell stories that we don't normally get to hear and understand each person's professional journey from a Black agilist or tech professional's perspective. We hope by hearing these stories that our Agile community will be able to identify with the storyteller and visualize their own possibilities and make new connections. So tonight, we are featuring Alicia Cyrus. I met Alicia, I first met Alicia back at Agile DC conference. I don't know, maybe it was 2015, 16, I can't remember now.
Yeah.
But it was when we were, I call it, we were both babies in the Agile community. And she was probably one of the first few Black women in Agile that I had personally connected with at that time. So, about Alicia, she's a dynamic technology leader with nearly 2 decades of experience leading transformative agile delivery, building high impact teams, driving meaningful change across both public, private sectors. I mean, she's done it all. Um, and while she was exploring people leadership, she also discovered a deeper calling in building community. So she's deeply committed to mentorship, equity, elevating voices that are often left out of the room. So we have that in common. And now she is also the host of a Thriving in the Game podcast. But I'm not going to go any further. That's just a teaser about Alicia. So please, Alicia, introduce yourself so we can all learn more about you and all the great things that you do.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much, Nicole. Thank you to you and the Agile and Color team for having me and giving me this space to share my story. And I just appreciate being here with you and everyone tonight. As you mentioned, I have almost 2 decades. It hurts when I say that out loud, but 2 decades of experience in IT. My background is product ownership, business analysis, project management. I've essentially grown up in the field, starting from the early days, working with information architects, and then slowly finding my path and working and building teams. And then outside of work, I am a granddaughter, a daughter, a sister, and a sister friend. I consider myself an encourager and a helper, and I am just in love with people leadership at this point in my career. So that's me.
Mm. That's awesome.
Thank
I
you.
mean, it's just amazing. When I hear the time like you spent in the industry, I don't think of it as, oh, it's showing our age. It's just showing all of the experience and the wonderful things that you have
Absolutely.
to share with this community. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
so let's go back a little bit. So way
Hmm.
back. So
Hmm.
tell me a little bit about where you grew up as a kid.
Oh wow. That's pretty interesting. I think it's something that makes me really good at my job now in terms of being adaptable and flexible, but I grew up a little bit of everywhere. I consider myself Southern, so I do call Texas, Houston, Texas, home. But I have roots in Alabama and Mississippi and lived in those states as well as Georgia and Illinois, and also spent some time living in West Germany at the time. I was actually there for reunification. And then around seventh grade, ended up in Texas and finished high school there, went to Texas A&M for undergraduate. And then my first master's was in my MBA was at Texas Southern. So that is where I call home. But yeah, definitely grew up a little bit of everywhere.
Great. Indeed.
Hmm.
I think we share a similar, I wouldn't call it checkered past, but yeah, I've been a few places
Yeah.
over here, over there, another country, we'll
Yeah,
just throw it in the mix. But it's really important for people to know that part of you because that has shaped who you are and how you experience the world and everything. So
definitely.
that's amazing. Thanks for sharing that with us.
Hmm.
So we're here obviously as Agile in Color and speaking from an IT perspective.
Hmm.
What got you started in IT? So what was really the interest?
Yeah. Well, it was interesting. My grandfather was an assistant provost at Tuskegee University, and at the time I spent ninth grade living with my grandparents. And I guess he had had a really hard day with, students coming in talking about they didn't know what their major was. And he comes home and he slams this book down on my bedroom floor. And I'm like, what is going on? And he's like, when you go to college, you're going to know what your major is. And so I literally spent probably 3 to 6 months researching almost every university and kind of like what I felt like were my passions at the time and what I wanted to do, and landed in business. And at the time I thought, oh, I love advertising, I love commercials, I'm going to go into marketing. So get into marketing. Made it into business school. Anybody who walks that journey those first couple years of college, it's a little rough with economics and finance. But around my, I would say, junior, first semester, senior year, took a class at the time. It was called Networking Communications, and it was essentially a little bit of a primer to, all types of different areas of IT. So I was actually really interested in it, and I spoke with the dean. We didn't offer minors, but I was like, what would give me a good background in this field as someone coming in as more of a marketing and considered myself a very creative person at the time. So came up with a list of courses. I started taking those. And then, I was definitely wanting to have a job before I graduated. And so I landed with a company called Dynegy at the time. The unfortunate part about Dynegy is we are the company that was in the process of purchasing Enron. And so I'll leave that there. Um, so that was my that was my entry into corporate America. But I landed in a rotational program, so it was actually really cool. I started out in, I think it was like products, production support, kind of that technical support. That wasn't quite me. The next rotation was in more of like hardware, software engineering, not my jam. But that third rotation, I landed with a team of information architects and technical writers. And so, even though that wasn't me specifically, the information architecture in particular appealed to me because it did use a little bit of that creativity. And then they were, doing mock-ups, they were doing heuristic studies. And so that for me was actually really, really cool. So I think within maybe 7, 8 months, um, again, we were in the process of purchasing Enron and the market fell apart in oil and gas, and I was laid off. And so I spent about 6 months just kind of, doing my thing, resting, chilling. And was fortunate that I was able to move in with my mom before, all of that took
Right.
place. So, I spent a good time just resting and ended up landing with a small team. It was a small company. They were eventually bought out by Fiserv, but they were essentially in print. And so they had created an in-house application. So I spent time learning that entire application, working with that team, and then supporting implementations team. So creating documentation, because it was actually in some ways really convoluted. So creating some just like basic step one, step two, step three guides for them, putting that kind of technical writing experience into work. But that's where I think the birthplace for me in terms of like working with and supporting teams and really began. And I spent about a year and a half with them before I went to graduate. I started my graduate program while there, and then eventually left. to just finish out my program full time. I wanted to do, they had a couple of different things. We were traveling, doing some business presentations, business case studies, all that kind of stuff. So enjoyed that last year as a student. Um, and then around, I would say probably about my last semester, a friend of mine was like, well, what are you going to do? And we had worked together at Dynegy, and she was always kind of like that mentor slash friend.
Hmm.
And I was like, I don't know. That's me. I'll find a job. And she was like, no, ma'am, I'm gonna need you to get it together. And so at her company, it was a small consulting firm. I started there as a junior PM, and probably within about 2 months, they made me an offer so that when I graduated, I went full time as a project manager with them. And so I don't know if I went on a journey way past your
No,
question, but I'm just giving
no.
you the whole background. So um, that was my foray. Actually, this was about 2006. So that was my first foray into Agile. They were probably more waterfall Agile, but
Okay.
that's when I started learning about the manifesto, and the way that I would work with my teams definitely aligned more with Agile principles. Most, traditional project managers
Mhm.
sat in their offices. They kind of barked out orders. I sat with my teams. My work always got done. So other
Right.
project managers were jealous, but it was really, those skills of negotiation and just working with them. And so not to talk too long, that was really where project management began. And then that's been essentially my career ever since, of a combination of business analysis. And really, I call it product ownership because I was leading projects then, but really that product ownership, project management kind of combination.
Oh, okay.
Hmm.
And so in that role in kind of product management,
Hmm.
what is it that you find most rewarding about that?
Oh my gosh, building cool stuff. Like I think that was that was the thing that stuck with me. Even in college, I thought that especially with code, it's an extremely creative thing. It's really dynamic to me that you get to build, take these binary numbers and letters, and then you create this website or this portal, this application. And I tried for a little bit to become a developer, but it was not my jam. But I think the benefit for me has always been, excuse me, I've always seen myself as kind of that bridge between IT and business. And
Mhm.
that was really my sweet spot. I knew how to talk to developers. I knew how to sometimes talk them off the ledge. I knew how to talk to business customers, and understanding what they were going for, trying to build, pulling in, a UX designer to help them kind of create the visual of what they were looking for, and then turn that into requirements that a developer could take and go build the thing, right? They're not, so I will say that some, I won't say all developers, but many are kind of like, just tell me what you want. So
Right.
being that person in between, knowing how to talk to both, I think is where I found, like I said, my sweet spot. And just being able to build really cool tools and applications and portals. I've had the pleasure of working with many, many wonderful teams. And so, yeah, that's been the best part of my career.
Feel like we have like such similar journeys because I did the same thing. I was a developer, hated it. Was like a test analyst, hated it. And then I spent a lot of time in business analysis. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's great being that bridge because then you can help with the communication and
Hmm.
make sure
Yeah,
that it doesn't go wonky and they don't get what they want, at least from a
exactly.
customer perspective.
Yeah,
So,
in my early days of consulting, the typical was kind of that handoff, right? You have
mhm.
this requirement session, you take these requirements, you go build them, and then 6 months later you come back, and then the customer's like, "That's not what I asked for." And so that's, essentially while I started as a PM, I eventually kind of quote unquote backed into, I didn't feel like I was going backwards, but I backed into business analysis because that's where I found that the miscommunication was happening. So the better I could be at helping a client really refine what they were asking for, the better I could communicate to a developer what they wanted to build.
Absolutely. So what has been, if that's the best part, what has been the biggest challenge for you?
How much time do you have? No, I'm just kidding. No, honestly, I think the I think it depends, right? I've kind of bounced in between consulting and then either public or private sector, throughout my career. So I think as a consultant, the hardest part is handing over something and then you don't always get to see it to fruition. You kind of see that initial launch, but then you hand this thing over that you've been close to, and then you move on. I think that's been the hardest part. I think in terms of working in industry is sometimes it just doesn't move as fast as consulting, right? In consulting, we stay up on the newest technologies. You're always learning something.
Yeah.
Things move really fast. You're upgrading really fast, and so you lose some of that when you're in industry. So it's always a balance of what's most important to you in the moment, what your priorities, your values are for your career. But consulting is really fast paced and it can
Hmm.
sometimes wear you out. And then industry can move really slow and you're kind of like, okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's definitely a dynamic space,
Hmm.
being a consultant. I will say
I
that.
know you know it well.
I do. I do. Um, so what kind of advice would you give, up and coming Black tech professionals, entering this field, especially right now? What kind of advice would you give them to aid in their career journey?
Yeah, I mean, I think like you said, right now it's a little different probably than the advice I would have given, a few months ago. Um, I think first and foremost, take care of you. I think, and I know that that's not necessarily the tech advice, but I think in this environment, you really have to remind yourself of who you are, of your skills, your qualifications, walk in there like the bad A that you are,
Mhm.
and know that the skills and the talent that you bring to the table, so to speak, is you're amazing. And oftentimes we are working, that one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, nine, 10 times harder. So you really have to be intentional about holding on to that. Obviously, we know the environment that we're working in. But I think entering this space, if given the opportunity, approach it with everything that you do with excellence, and then broaden your horizons. If you're coming into consulting, that's always a great space because you're getting exposed to a lot of different technologies. You have the opportunity to get certified very quickly usually. So definitely put those, whether it be tuition or training dollars to use. If you're coming into industry, I would still recommend the same, right? Even if you have to make the investment on your own, make sure that you're getting certifications. You're being intentional about creating learning goals. You're being intentional about creating even technology goals. Even if you're kind of like myself, I'm not extremely technical. I try, but it is not my gift. Um, but like I said, my gift that I nurture has been learning from technical people. I have literally asked devs to explain things to me like a 5 year old, and then sometimes like a 3 year old, and sometimes like a 2 year old, until I get it. But being able to have those conversations well, and to understand the technology that you're working with, and you're able to communicate the benefits and the cons of like the different solutions that you're presenting. All of that just adds to your confidence, and it just I think just it builds you up and makes you, yeah, it makes you more confident in you coming to the table and what you bring.
Indeed, very sage advice in our turbulent times.
Well, yeah. That's
Well,
putting it lightly.
if we go back and it's like, so that's your
Yeah.
advice for up and comers. What
Mm-hmm.
was the best career advice that you received?
Oh, that's a good one. Like I said, I've had a few different people in my career who were friends, but again, kind of towed the line as mentors. And they were the ones who encouraged me to make sure that I was getting my certifications and learning as much as I could. They were the ones who were pushing me to, don't get too comfortable.
Mm.
Not that you have to bounce around. I actually did in my career. The longest I've ever spent in a role is 2.5 years. That was probably my last role, and then one maybe about 10 years ago. But usually I'm about a year and a half in a role. Um, and they just always encouraged me to push in terms of learning. If I hit, a point where I'm stalling out or stagnant, find something else and don't be afraid to do that. And so, yeah, that was probably the best advice in terms of like keeping myself going, continuing to build my career, build my salary range, all of that. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's great advice. I know that some people who feel like they've had, you know, shorter tenures at different places,
Mhm.
they might feel anxious about how to, represent themselves on a resume because,
Mhm.
some people can interpret that as like, oh, lack of commitment or whatever.
Mhm.
How did you use that to your advantage when you're like job hunting?
Yeah, I always encourage the I explained it through I wanted to learn something different, right? Like I think in business analysis, in project management specifically, it really never changes, right? You can become a PM and a senior PM, but ultimately you're still leading projects. It really does not change. So I would say I've only had a couple organizations ask me about it, but I usually explain that, I reached a point with the organization, there was no upward mobility. I hit, the top of the range. So things were not going to change for me. And I wanted to expand my knowledge. I wanted to build additional experience. I put it off for a long time, but eventually I was also trying to work my way into people leadership. So usually that's how I explain it. And then too, I mean, depending upon even if you're a developer or QA, if you're working with teams, those skills only improve as you work with different people, right? Like I've worked with people who've been in the same environment, for 5, 10, 15 years. And not that I don't have an appreciation for that, but sometimes, and some of those people, not everybody, but some of those people can be really limited in terms of like adopting new processes or new tools, right? So they get
Yeah.
very comfortable. It's always worked this way.
Hmm.
But it can work a little differently, right?
Right.
So I think there's always that balance, again, of like what you are looking for out of your career. I don't recommend job hopping just for the sake of job hopping, but if you happen to be in a toxic environment and it's not working for you, I, let's make a plan, roll out. If you're hitting the top of your salary bracket and there's no development, there's no promotion, and you're just feeling stagnant, look for something else in the market, and don't be afraid of that. I think again, if you walk in there with confidence, you talk about how your ability to spin up new teams and things like that. I think it works in your favor.
Indeed. I think so. So on that thread, so who are the, I guess, could be agilists, tech professionals, whoever,
Mhm.
that you look up to now for inspiration?
I think it's always changing. Just because there's a lot in the market now. I would say with the proliferation of AI, Sinead Bovell, I think is how you pronounce her last name. She's a Canadian tech ed or ed tech creator. I think the company's called Way. I follow her just because I call it a responsibility narrative. But I love her approach to AI. She considers herself a futurist. She's often talking about, the probably the positives and the negatives around the use of AI and how it's being used, and also ensuring that, children, kids are making sure that they also have kind of a stake in that as
Mm.
well in terms of learning it and knowing how to be prompt engineers and all of that. So she's someone that I actually really like the way that she presents information, and it's almost like kind of newsy. But watching her on Instagram and kind of just listening to what she has to say, she's someone that I'm following. Trina L. Hill is also someone that I saw her on a podcast. I forget the host, the name of it. The gentleman's name is Cyrus, and because of my last name,
Right.
it's like, yeah, I love it. But she is someone that I've started following, and I think the way that just she's had a career, I think over 25 years. She focuses on risk management, technology consulting, but also coaching. And I just appreciate having an example of a Black woman who has reached that executive level, that advisory level in tech. I think for a lot of us, it's difficult to reach that point. And so I see her as, even though I don't know her, I kind of see her as someone who's more of a mentor in the space. And then outside of that, I typically am following local agilists. I follow you, Brandon Rains. It's like I keep up. You are one of the best people because it's like you're always amplifying someone. So I'm always like, I'm like, okay, well, who did Nicole? Who is this? Okay, let me go follow them, or listen to whatever they're presenting. So
Yeah.
yeah, those are the people that are really inspiring me now. I think. I kind of have my eye on some others, just as again, as they talk about AI, but it's hard. It's that balance of like, we know there'll be another term in the future, but at the same
Hmm.
time, you don't want to be left behind. So,
Right.
I'm trying to still find my space in AI, but I pay attention to a lot of what people are talking about because I am concerned about just the loss of potential creativity,
Mm,
the loss of ownership in terms of what you create and how it's, manipulated with AI. So yeah, definitely paying attention to those
mm,
folks.
mm. So, and this might be along the same thread in
Mhm.
terms of what are the skills that have been most beneficial for you in your career journey?
Yeah, definitely the soft skills. Um, I am someone who is introverted and
Me too.
probably a little shy, but I tend to play extroverted on TV, as I always say. And
Yeah,
so
I get it.
yeah, you have to, it's funny because it's not that I feel like it's a mask, but not necessarily. I'm always myself.
Right.
Sometimes maybe to my detriment. But I think building those soft skills in terms of how you are able to speak with everyone from your junior developers all the way up to the CEO, knowing how to present, and not only design presentations and training guides and things like that for external users, but for your team and for executive level. Knowing how to build the reports, knowing the information that's important to those different audiences. That is something that has served me extremely well. And I've had to learn, because you start off in your career, it's like, well, here's all the information. That
Right.
does not work for an executive. They want the high points. And so you have to quickly learn kind of, I think consulting helps with that as well. You
Right.
learn how to speak to those different audiences. Um, Being open to different opportunities. Like I said, I started kind of a PM and then I went into business, shifted back into business analysis. And I say back because that's typically how people look at it. The path is normally BA to PM, and I went the opposite way. And then once I discovered product ownership and Scrum, I was like, oh, this is my spot.
Hmm.
This is me. This is what I've been working towards this whole
Right.
time. But I think had I not been open to, my friend's suggestion, had I not been open to some of the other roles that even though they weren't a project manager title, I might have lost out on those learning opportunities. So, definitely, be open to something different.
Right.
And then I would say, just building your network. It's something that I still am like, I'm a one-on-one person,
Hmm.
but still, even with old coworkers, just kind of keeping in touch. My recent role is, I worked with this. She's now a director, but she was a developer 12 years ago that I worked with. But we just so happen to stay in touch on like LinkedIn and Instagram. And that is how I found my role. So, definitely keeping your networks, nurturing your network, staying in touch with people, even if it's once or twice a year. You
Hmm.
never know how, especially in this type of environment, how important that can be.
That is true.
Hmm.
I know that like you, it's like networking.
Hmm.
I prefer to focus on building your community.
Yes. And
Because
that's why I
then,
call it connection, right? Because
yeah,
it doesn't feel as icky if it's like I'm
yes,
connecting with people.
exactly. It's like, this is my community. We have things
Hmm.
in common, we're
Yeah,
helping each other. It's not transactional. So that,
exactly.
I like connection and community. So I
Same.
totally vibe on that one for
Absolutely.
sure. But I know, you talked about, I mentioned something in your intro about being a people leader.
Hmm.
And so what do you think is one thing that you do regularly
Hmm.
that makes you a better leader?
Ooh, I like that question. Um, hmm. I think it's just I approach, each of these relationships with just genuine authenticity. I am who I am. I kind of said that at the beginning of my working relationship. I am here. Um, I am someone who will amplify you, who will, put your name out there. I will challenge you to speak up. I will challenge you to present. Because at the end of the day, I have a sincere goal of you elevating, even if you choose not to. I want to make sure that you know that I am committed to helping you develop in your role and beyond, if you so choose. And so I think that has been a plus for me because I think people that I've worked with, my last role, it was someone who was very early career, and then I was also working with someone very seasoned. In my current role, again, I guess, probably one who's inching towards mid-career and then one who is much more seasoned in his career. And so I think people just recognize that, I'm not here to trip you up. I'm not here for any gotchas. I want you to do your work and do your part.
Right.
And then, wherever you struggle, I will make sure that I set aside time. And so, I do that. I nurture, like I said, I have weekly one-on-ones just because I'm newer in this role and eventually will probably shift to bi-weekly. But it's not to micromanage. It literally is a touch point to see what's going on, how's life, how's work, where can I help, where can I support. And so I think just that again, that genuine authenticity in the relationship
Mhm.
has definitely made me a better leader.
I think, yeah, definitely if you are, showing that you're human
Hmm.
too, that helps to create that level of trust, right? Because
Yeah.
they don't feel like, oh, I have to be this certain way. Alicia's
Not at
coming
all.
around and asking me questions.
Not at all. And as a matter of fact, when you say that I'm very like my teams, I mean, I'm always professional, but
Yes.
everybody has a day. And sometimes, like I told my team the other day, I have an attitude. So I'm just gonna be quiet today. I'm like, it's gonna work itself out, but I have an attitude. So and they were like, I get it. Do you need a walk? Do we need to go get coffee? And I was like, yes. So I think just having moments like that where, people recognize, like, I get it. We all have, different lives, different things going on. And so you don't have to pretend with me, but we are professional, but you
Yeah,
don't have to have any pretense with me. My goal is very simple, and very plain with people. I want to see you rise higher in tech if that's what you want to do.
awesome.
Hmm.
So on the flip side of that, in
Hmm.
your long, lustrous career,
Did you ever say long
what
like that?
long
Long.
experience career? Um, let's see. What are the qualities that you think other modern leaders are lacking that you've
Oh, that's a
witnessed?
dangerous question. I think you said it, that humanness. I think there's a lack of empathy sometimes, and then sometimes I think people can take advantage, right? The authenticity for me is always a little interesting because I want you to bring your most authentic professional self to the workplace. But also modern leaders, I think, yeah, I would say sometimes we're lacking that humanness or that empathy. Um, and especially with consulting, sometimes it can lean towards, we it's about the dollars. That's what we're there for. And so, that for me has also been challenging, as someone who does see themselves as more of an empathic person. I always care about the person above the money. And so, yeah, sometimes that creates some conflicts. I would say, yeah, that's probably the area that I think modern leadership is. I don't know. I don't know if it's because of the times that we're in, that seems to be waning.
Mhm.
But
People
yeah,
are kind of like backtracking on the emotional intelligence
yes,
quotient.
it feels like it sometimes. It definitely does. And like I said, that was hard for me, coming out of my last role, because I'm worried about people. We came out of a pandemic, and now we're
Right,
entering recession-like times, and now we're even in a even completely different space in 2025. So
right.
for me, it's always kind of like, I understand people have to do their work, but at the same time, I want to make sure that people are okay. Like, I want you to be good. I want you to be
Yeah,
whole all the way
right.
around.
You
Yeah,
might not be good, good, but you're good.
yeah, you're good.
Let's see. It's a little bit related, but
Mhm.
not totally.
Yeah.
If you had to think back, what was the worst leadership decision that you've ever made?
That I've made?
Mhm.
Ooh. Let's see. I don't know. So far, I've been pretty good. No, just kidding. Um,
Well, not maybe not the worst, but not great.
I would say probably something I've experienced more recently is in working with people. I focus on creating a safe space, creating trust. But sometimes you have to recognize that people are limited in that area. And not that I've been in a position where I have to watch my back or anything like that, but I think sometimes you just have to recognize you can only do so much as a leader. And, it's disappointing, I think, because I'm just that person of like, yay, not kumbaya, but like, yay,
Right,
we're a team.
right,
And I think sometimes you just have to accept, that you can only do so much. You create a space of trust, but at the same time, you have to just accept people, and how they work and how they approach things as they are.
right. That's true.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's tough because you
Mhm.
have, like you said, you're trying to create this space of growth, and then some are just not
Not
there.
with it.
Not there, not with it, not on the same page or the train.
No, they're not. And but that's okay. I think it's for me as a leader, I'm still developing in terms of like working with different types of people, different personalities. So I think just having that experience as a younger leader, so to speak, in terms of like title,
Yeah.
because I feel like I've been a leader, my throughout my
Hmm.
career, but like in terms of title, I think it's just another lesson to help
Right.
develop me. So
Right.
yeah.
So what has been um the biggest risk that you've ever taken, that you feel that you've taken?
Career wise,
Yeah.
yeah.
Could be career-wise, could be more than that. You
Yeah, I mean, I would say, Nicole and I we were catching up, and I was telling that, I was in the Charlotte area for, close to 6 years. And so I, took a big risk. I was with a consulting company. I left my role for a contract to perm role. And it was kind of like, once you get here, 6 months, we'll hire you full time, we'll reimburse your moving expenses. And then that clock kept ticking and ticking and ticking and ticking. And so finally I was just like, look, where are we?
right.
Is this going to happen? Is this not? And so it ended with me leaving and going to another company, because It was a big risk professionally,
Mhm.
but I'm glad I took it. Because I definitely made some great friends that I still have to this day, um, and some good professional connections. But it was a risk that I took, and it just didn't work out in my favor, and that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably shaped your part of the path that shaped your career. So,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah. And
it's
definitely learned some lessons in that one. We won't
right.
do, I don't know that we're gonna do that one again. We'll see.
Yeah, it's like,
I
yeah,
might.
what were the lessons that we learned so we don't repeat history? Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh. Indeed, we want to learn from everything. And nothing is an exact failure. It's an opportunity for learning. And
Hmm.
so I think that's really an important message that to share with everyone right now
Hmm.
is that nothing is a failure. It's definitely an opportunity to learn because
Yeah.
um, I think right now flexibility is key.
Hmm.
You have to
Hmm.
kind of roll with the punches
Yeah.
and, sometimes it works for you and sometimes it
Sometimes
doesn't
it
work
doesn't.
for you.
Yeah.
But I think also, what you've demonstrated is the resilience
Hmm.
because that's the other part, right? To
Yeah.
having things
Thank
not work
you.
out for you.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah, because I mean that is really something I think some people struggle with, and I
Hmm.
think if we can share how to build resilience,
Hmm.
then we, I guess, feel less restricted in taking those risks because we feel
Yeah.
like, okay, I can bounce back from this. This is not the end.
Hmm.
I can still move forward in some shape or form. So,
Yeah. And
like, so
something,
go ahead.
to your point, something that I've kind of adopted recently is strategic resilience, right? Like, I definitely don't think you should, take opportunities that just wear you out unless you have a game plan, right? Like
Yeah.
if this is, you know, in this market, I need a role. This is, quote unquote fast paced, which is like I am working many hours and things like that. Like if you need to take the role or if you just want to take the role, do that, but have your game plan of like your exit plan, how you're going to strategically handle those kinds of things. If you get knocked down, again, it's again being strategic with that resilience. Like, take the hit, it's okay, dust yourself off, something else will come along. You just have to, find what's next. Don't let it keep you down too long. So, yeah, but that idea of resilience or strategic resilience, as I call it, I think, especially in this market now, that's going to become more and more important. But it's definitely something that I've just rolled with throughout my career. I've been through um, directly impacted by two layoffs in my career. I've gone through a third with a different company. Um, these things happen. It's not necessarily a reflection of you or your performance. Sometimes you just have to recognize it's a business decision. And I think as long as you keep that in the back of your mind as you're building your career, um, I think you can have an excellent career. You can be positive, but you can also be realistic in how you approach, what I call the game.
Right,
Yeah.
right, right. Indeed, it is a game. And
Mhm.
one thing that they're playing a game with right now is DEI.
Yeah.
And so I know in some spaces it's like a bad word now, and it's like, what? What DEI? I never heard of it.
Right.
But there are still companies who, buck the trend,
Mm-hmm.
and will make space
Mm-hmm.
regardless of what everybody else is doing.
That's right.
Um, so for those unique companies,
Mm-hmm.
how do you feel that they can create some equity for Black and people of color technologists to accelerate their career path?
That's a wonderful question. My first thought is, one, we need real commitment and investment in Black BIPOC professionals, right? We have to move beyond the affinity groups. Those are great. It's great support, but to me, it's all about investment. And that means recruiting top talent and retaining that talent, making sure that you have a clear career path for people, a clear promotion path, one that builds people's skills. Not everyone is going to go into leadership, but are you developing that talent? Are they going to conferences? Are they, getting certifications and receiving training that is worthwhile to their career? To me, that's where I want to see that. I work in an environment where, our CEO has reiterated his commitment to a diverse staff, and you see that reflected in my organization. So I think that is where I want to see that. You can tell me all day you want to see equitable spaces, diverse spaces, but if I don't see that reflection in your organization or in your recruitment process,
Right.
it's just words for me.
Right.
So, yeah.
Talk is cheap.
Pay my people. No, I'm just kidding.
Like a little less talk, a little more action.
There you go.
Oh my gosh. All right. Well, we're running out of time here.
Okay.
So let me just try and get to a couple more things
Yeah.
before we wrap it up. So I would definitely want you to share with everybody, what are you currently striving for or goals that you have right now?
Yeah, I think so. Professionally, I am still building my skills as a leader, and building my development in that space. I'm currently a manager of business analysis. And so, like I said earlier, I have a couple of direct reports. And I'm also trying to continue building my technical skills in terms of like data and machine learning and AI. And then outside of that, my passion, which you've mentioned, is thriving in the game. It's a podcast dedicated to uplifting Black women in tech. Like I said, I have, looking at last month's numbers and seeing that 106,000 Black women in tech were laid off.
Mm.
It's painful. But I think we invest a lot in terms of recruiting Black women, Black talent, or people of color. But as you also said, it's like we don't have a lot of investment in terms of them being retained and rising higher and seeing them reflected in leadership. So that is, my passion. This first season was focused on early to mid-career. And then the next season will focus on mid-career to that first level of management. But I try to focus on topics that speak to maybe that EQ side in terms of like belonging and value set and making career decisions, but also really focusing on how to be strategic in your career. And I think as I develop my people at work, it's the same thing. Regardless of whether you choose to go into leadership, you have to have some strategy about how you build your skills, how you develop in your career. And so that's just where my focus is at this season.
Yes, and I will recommend it. I've put it in the chat. Hopefully people can see it.
Thank you.
That you listen, you join, you sign up to hear
Yeah,
about Thriving in the Game. There is an
yeah.
episode on personal and professional branding. It was great. I
Thank you.
totally recommend people listen to that
Yeah.
because branding is a big thing.
Yes.
So definitely tune into that. But before we wrap up, Alicia, is there anything that um, that anything else you want to cover or that we didn't cover in our conversation that you want everyone to know about you or about your experience?
I think we covered me pretty well. It's hard talking about myself for this long. But I would say more of what I've learned throughout my career is, and again, especially in these times, take care of yourself, set healthy habits in terms of even outside of your career, the way you nurture your mental, your spiritual, your emotional health, and your physical health. Obviously, especially if you're early in your career, put those habits in place early on. I've had and been witness to and experienced personally, burnout. I've had a number of friends who've had to take medical leave, and specifically for Black women in terms of like our in terms of stroke and heart disease, the impact of stress is
Mm,
just
yeah.
ridiculous. And obviously, we're in very stressful times, right? So I think when people look at rest, it's like release every single thing. Now I say release every stressful thing. And
Mm,
that just means being able to, again, kind of be strategic in how you approach work and you view work, and not allowing that to impact you personally. I know it's hard. I've struggled with it, and
yeah,
I'm still learning to do it. But I think the more we take care of ourselves and each other, we'll make it through these turbulent times together.
indeed. That
Mhm.
is a great note to end things on, that we will make it through together.
Yeah.
Uh, Alicia, thank you so much for
Thank
sharing your
you.
story with us. I really appreciate it. I know everyone listening appreciates it. This will be live streamed on YouTube so people can re-listen, share that, share Thriving in the Game. Please
Yes.
listen. It's amazing series, and I only hope for the best for the success of your podcast. So thank you again. I have put Alicia's LinkedIn in the chat, the link to Thriving in the Game.
Mhm.
We want to make sure we build connections, so please feel free to connect with
Please.
her or connect
Yes.
with me on LinkedIn. I also put my LinkedIn information in there. And also, generally for everyone, you'll find and be able to find Alicia's recording on our YouTube channel, along with a lot of great other thought leaders and agilists and tech professionals. So please, please, please check it out. Again, thank you so much, Alicia. It's been great speaking with you tonight.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Have a good night, everyone. We got CP. So
Okay.
we should be good.
All right. Thank you so much.
That was awesome.
Oh, thank you. It was. Thank you. I was like, I felt bad. I was like, I think I'm talking too long. Let me
I
hush.
know. It's your light, it's your spotlight. That's what we're
Yeah.
here for your story. So no, that's the idea.
Yeah.
Because we want to make sure that people can relate. I mean,
Yeah.
our paths have been very similar in terms
Mhm.
of just roles we've done and
Yeah.
lives where we've lived, and so
Yeah.
that's the idea, is for people to say, "Oh, I have the same similar experience, we're not
Yeah.
that different." So,
Yeah.
that's the goal. That's the goal. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
it's
I'm sad because I thought I was gonna get to see you at Agile DC.
I
Because I
know. I know. Let's just say, I mean, it's been a good move, but it was a
Mhm.
rough transition, I would tell you that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was very stressful because we were trying to get down here before Landon started school, so it was just
Mhm.
like a race. And
Yeah.
it's taken a year to recover.
I understand. I understand. But if I'm ever in Florida, I will definitely connect with you.
Yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
definitely, definitely. Maybe I could make it up there this year. I just saw that it was announced that it's like the end of October or something
Yeah,
this year.
October
I
27th.
was
I
like,
just
man,
I
that's,
shared the email out today with some people. That's how I know.
yeah. It's like, man, that's late. Usually it's like September or early October. So
Mhm.
I have to see if I can swing it and
Yeah,
sneak out.
I know. I
Leave the
know. Come up
kiddos.
for the weekend.
Right? Exactly. It's like I need them into vacation.
Exactly. Let me go.
Yes, that's what I do. I go to conferences to get away.
Oh, he says, all my mom friends, they're like, mm-mm, I'm going to the conference.
I'm telling you, man. I just submitted for another one. I'm like, okay, we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I will kind of just, if I don't do any more, because I
Mhm.
don't I don't have a lot this year, but
Mhm.
I will definitely try